Anatomy of a cylinder.
Objectives. In hydraulics there are really only two motions: going around in a circle, or going back and forth. Let's look at things that go back and forth. Lesson. In this lesson we will examine some of the external and internal structure of a linear actuator, or as they are more commonly known, a hydraulic cylinder. The simple cylinder. Hydraulic cylinders come in many different shapes and sizes, but for the most part they all share some basic elements. The two most obvious components are the rod and the barrel. The barrel is the part which the rod moves in and out from. The end of the cylinder that the rod is sticking out of is called the rod end. The opposite end of the cylinder is called the blind end for some reason. From the outside you can see the ports, where hydraulic fluid can enter or exit the barrel, as well as the type of mounting connections. The piston. There's a lot going on inside the cylinder barrel. The inside diameter of the cylinder barrel is called the bore. This is the space that the rod moves through. The piston is attached to the rod. It's the component that nearly makes contact with the bore. The piston contains two O-rings. The first prevents the high-pressure oil from escaping between the clearance of the piston and the bore. The second O-ring, usually called the stem seal, is inset into the piston and prevents high-pressure oil from leaking between the piston and the rod stem. The piston will also have what are known as backup rings. A backup ring prevents a round seal, O-ring, from extruding through the clearance between the piston and the bore. In this example there are two backup rings being used. One to back up the O-ring when high pressures are introduced from the right-hand side and one to back up the O-ring when high pressures are introduced from the left-hand side. Two components keep the rods centered in the barrel. One is the piston. But what is the other one? The gland. In a simple and inexpensive cylinder, the gland is held in place by a retaining snap ring. More complex cylinder designs can use a whole gland end assembly to hold things in place. More on this later. Gland seal. The gland also has a couple of seals. One on the outside, the gland seal, prevents high-pressure oil escaping between the clearance of the gland and the bore. Rod seal. And a second, internal seal, which prevents high-pressure oil from escaping between the clearance of the gland and the rod. Backup ring. The rod seal has its own backup ring. It is similar in function to the piston backup rings. Finally, the gland also has a wiper seal. This is used to keep birds, rocks, dirt, and ice from getting into the cylinder barrel. Stroke. Finally there is the stroke. The stroke is the distance that a piston travels in a barrel.